Hello and welcome to Africa Today. I'm Olukayode, Alayande. After 20 years of democracy, May the 7th, 2014 will go down in history as a day which had a large turnout of voters in about 22,000 polling stations across South Africa. The outcome of the polls, which was largely adjudged peaceful, free and fair, saw the ruling African National Congress sweep towards victory in the Rainbow Nation's fifth post-apartheid election. In a similar trend to previous polls, opposition candidates lost to the top position to the incumbent, but this time they gained grounds on other levels. Before now, there were concerns about the ruling ANC's dwindling popularity amidst pressing economic needs and a list of scandals that characterized Jacob Zuma's first term in office. Now that the 2014 South African election is done with, what should be the focus of the Jacob Zuma-led government? You can talk to us on Twitter at TVC Africa Today or send an email to africatoday@tvcnews.tv. We'll take this clip on citizens stating what they want from the new government, and Africa Today will be right back. Stay with us.
The biggest challenge with us in the country is unemployment, education, health, normal social issues that people are faced with. But I think with the present government that we have at the moment, I think if we still get into power, they'll still come up with a better strategy to make sure that those things they get into place as soon as they can. Otherwise, in my opinion, I don't see any other option other than what the government we have at the moment.
Employment, a lot of social development, a lot is needed in our society, and there's still backyarders that are living with their parents since they were born. There's like 12, 11 people living in the same house, so I think there needs to be more housing as well. There's a lot that needs to be done, and I'm hoping that my party will make the difference instead of building their own Nkandla.
That okay, this election will bring more about the change, and I'm here to vote, and I hope that okay, the oppositional party that I'm going to vote for, it can improve our living conditions, because there is no improvements here. So I hope so. Maybe in next coming 5 years there will be improvement in our living places.
Election results with over 98% of votes counted show that the ruling ANC African National Congress ANC is tentatively the winner. It claims 70.07% of the vote. Its nearest rival, Democratic Alliance DA, gained more grounds and improved on the 16.7% it won 5 years ago, while the new party, Economic Freedom Fighters, which launched a few months back, came third, the 1 million vote mark, which they exceeded. Joining us to look at the outcome of the South African election is Dr. Olukayode of the Political Science Department at the University of Lagos. As we proceed on the show, we will also link up via Skype with David Smith. He is a security expert and political analyst, and of course, Director Okapi Consulting in South Africa. Now back to the studio with Dr. Olukayode. Now, from the candidates to the electoral body and the citizens, what do you make of the whole voting and polling exercise in South Africa's election?
Well, I think it's good news all the way. Good news in the sense that democracy is improving in Africa. What has just concluded in South Africa may not be a very perfect election, as the case may be, but it's a strong indication that they are building enduring opposition. And if you remove opposition from democracy, the answer you get is zero. If you look at the structure, ANC is the ruling party. It led the election. The victory is retained. Okay? But Democratic Alliance has slightly improved from the 17 point something percent to what you have now as 22%. And then there's this new party that was formed just last year, a year old, those who are fighting for economic freedom, okay? Surprisingly, it came third. That tells you that the polity is building an enduring opposition. I tell people that opposition in democracy doesn't just come like a flash in the pan. It has to build over the years. So in summary, while it is not uhuru yet for Africa, what has happened in South Africa is an indication that democracy is improving all over Africa around.
It's a good point that you made, but if you look at the Democratic Alliance, which is led by majority of whites, and that's one of the problems they had with the Aganga SA candidate. There seems to be a problem with South Africans, the black South Africans and white South Africans. And though the party might have had an advantage in moving forward in their numbers, but if you look at how strong the party itself is, do you think it can spring any meaningful surprise in the next election?
Well, my analysis was not based on party. It was based on the value called democracy. And I said, and I'm repeating this, that opposition building is improving and democracy is improving. You must understand a post-apartheid democracy. It has its nature, it has its peculiarity, it has its own characteristic. Not like a post-military democracy, the kind that we have in Nigeria. Okay? ANC is not an ordinary political party. In South Africa, to South Africans, it's a party of sentiment. It's a party of emotion. It's a party that symbolizes the unity of the people. And that is why, in spite of the skirmishes of scandals that you had all around during the Jacob Zuma arraignment, they quickly were able to come together because of the hegemony, because of the value that they all share. When you have such a party in place, it is very difficult, if not impossible, for any party to come from anywhere, either as opposition or something, to make meaningful progress. That is why I said we must congratulate Africa, because democracy is improving. In spite of the peculiarity, Democratic Alliance has been able to improve on its ability to stand as a meaningful opposition to the South African ANC.
All right, Dr. Kayode, hold your thoughts. Let's talk to the guest we have joining us via Skype, David Smith, Director, Okapi Consulting. David, how satisfied are you with the just concluded elections in your country?
Good evening. Very satisfied. I have to agree with what Dr. Kayode said a moment ago, that it's good news. I mean, by all accounts, it went just about as well as any national and provincial set of elections can go. There are always a few little incidents in every election, a few stories about ballots that were found in places where they shouldn't have been, but these are all very, very minor things for what was generally believed by everybody, no matter who they voted for, whether they be on the right or the left or in the center. South Africans are united in saying that the election's been a big success.
All right, despite the scandals, Jacob Zuma will remain in office for the next 5 years. How much of a second term do you think he deserves?
Ooh, that's quite a question. How much does he deserve? I hesitate to be the judge of what Jacob Zuma should be doing over the next 5 years. But, I suppose it's safe to say that he has the support of his party, at least right now, and he also has the support, and we have to look at bottom lines here. He has the support of most of the population of South Africa. The ANC has an overwhelming majority. Not as big as it has been in the past. In fact, it's the smallest of the majorities that the ANC has ever had, but it's still an overwhelming majority. So whether or not he should stay in power for the next 5 years, I mean, it's a moot point as far as democracy is concerned. The ANC won the election, and Jacob Zuma is the president, and those who are not happy with that are, dare I say, in a minority.
All right, many look back and say that the late Nelson Mandela would have wished not just for a better country, but for a better leadership. How far off that trajectory has South Africa gone?
Well, I think the ANC is quite a different party from what it was in 1994. It's changed a lot, and the leadership has changed dramatically. It's also, in some ways, its ethnic composition at the top has changed. You know, Mr. Mandela and the president who followed him, Thabo Mbeki, were both from a particular ethnic group in South Africa known as the Xhosa. And now we have the ANC dominated by the largest ethnic group in South Africa, the Zulu, which is one of the reasons why one of the stronger parties, the stronger regional parties in previous elections, something called the Inkatha Freedom Party, headed by Chief Mangosuthu Buthelezi, was almost wiped off the map in this particular election. People used to vote for the Inkatha Freedom Party, or the IFP, if they felt that they needed stronger Zulu representation in government. That's not needed anymore because the ANC fulfills that goal for that particular ethnic group. Perhaps I'll stop there for a moment.
Smith, thank you very much, but do hold on, stay on the line. We'll come back to you in a short while. Back to the studio, Dr. Kayode Isuola. Now, there have been complaints after complaints about the performance in terms of leadership of Jacob Zuma. And one would have thought that they will follow really after the ideals and popularity of Nelson Mandela. How far off have they gone?
Well, we need to be a bit fair here. You know, what made Nelson Mandela popular was not, in my view, necessarily his performance in office as the president of South Africa. As a matter of fact, what made Mandela popular was his role in fight against apartheid. Africans, South Africans, all over the world, people see him as a symbol of freedom, a symbol of unity. And so he had the opportunity of leading South Africa for just one single time. And after the single time, he honorably said he was no longer coming back. I think he learned to lead when the ovation was loudest. It's a bit difficult for you to compare between what Mandela's tenure was and what Jacob Zuma's tenure has been all the while, given the circumstances, given the euphoria of post-apartheid freedom and every other thing. You may not want to really compare because the ground will not be level for you to have fair analysis of the case. Having said that, I will not score Zuma very well in terms of performance. This is not because I live in South Africa. It is simply because from what we read in the papers, from our visits and observation, there are a series of problems. There is high level of unemployment. The educational system has not significantly improved from what it was as an anti-black system compared to what you have now, to the extent that most of the vital positions in the state that are supposed to be filled by the black, cannot attract such because the blacks have not been strategically advantaged when it comes to education. And I've not seen any concrete policy. Concrete, I'm saying. There have been policies, of course, but no concrete policies that have significantly addressed it. Having said that, democracy attempts to solve social problems. And when you want to solve human problems, you don't do it like euphoric effect. You don't use placebo effect. When you want to build a nation that endures, the problem is not solved just drastically and suddenly. You must try, you must have errors, you must have mistakes, you must engineer, interrogate and reinterrogate. And then in the process of doing that, you arrive at something enduring. So there is hope.
All right, Dr. Isuola, hold your thoughts. I'll continue in that direction when we come back. You are watching Africa Today. We'll take a short break. We'll be back in just a moment. You're watching Africa Today. We still have joining us via Skype on the program David Smith, an entrepreneur, of course, in South Africa. I'm told, David, that you really would like to react to Dr. Kayode's response to my last question.
Yes, thank you very much. It's not to contradict what he's saying; it's to add to it, and in fact agree. I mean, I may have sounded a little bit earlier as if I was painting a totally rosy picture of Jacob Zuma, and that would be incorrect. I think and I'd like to hear what Dr. Kayode has to say about this as well. I mean, I think a lot of ANC supporters are not necessarily supporters of Jacob Zuma. You know, in some cases, I'm going to be very frank about it, some people would have gone into the voting booth and perhaps even held their nose and voted ANC. Because they believe in the party, everything the party stands for, has stood for, and hope what the party will deliver in the next 5 years. But many ANC supporters don't think that Jacob Zuma is the person to take them there. So why, you might ask, did they vote for him, or did they vote for the ANC? Because South Africa is still a very young country. It's only 20 years old. And most people, apart from the youngest, who are going to make their X in that voting booth, remember very clearly apartheid. It wasn't very long ago. And it would be very difficult to vote for a party that did not help free South Africa in the 80s and the 90s. In the DA, which is a party which I believe has the most noble of intentions for South Africa, most people in South Africa also remember that there are elements in the DA who were part of the old administration. And it's pretty hard for South Africans who remember apartheid to vote for a party that is perceived to be predominantly catering to whites. Whether or not the Democratic Alliance does that is another story. But as long as there is a large majority of South Africans who have a living memory of apartheid, the ANC is going to be able to get away with a lot and continue being the government of this country.
Dr. Kayode, I saw that you gave a big nod to the first point that he made when he had the line. Do you want to add to that?
Oh, yeah, because I mean, I practically said that at the opening part of my speech.
All right, so let me put this to you. If Jacob Zuma was to take advantage of another 5 years that he has, what should he be doing? He and his team, what should they be thinking about now?
Well, I think it's high time Zuma realizes what we are saying in the studio now, that he got into that office not because of him, but because of the sentiment attached to ANC as a party of symbolism, which denotes freedom, whichever way you like it. If you understand it from that perspective, it will begin to work very seriously on the economy of South Africa. You know, it is doing things seriously, and a very serious attention must be paid to it. And you must remember that the the Economic Freedom Fighters Party is a reaction to the deprivation, to the economic retardedness of the South African society. So attention must be paid now to the issue of nationalization of these industries. Is it viable in this new capitalist world? It's a very vital question that he needs to address. And I think he should engage a lot of his academics to brainstorm on that before he finally takes decision. So economy is one thing. Another thing is the educational system in South Africa. Till today, as we speak, the black people are still at a very serious disadvantaged position, and that must be given a serious attention. Given these two, South Africa is quite different from Nigeria. Here in this country, we're still struggling with basic amenities. No water, no electricity, the roads are bad. And so a president that comes gives attention to all these mundane, just miserable things that are taken for granted in other countries. And then he has no time to deal with real theoretical, economic, political issues. Over there, it's a different ball game. The road is taken for granted. Electricity is taken for granted. Water, I don't think they have problem in that area. Let him now focus on building the economy so that South Africa will remain the position that it is as at now in global ranking when it comes to economy.
Let me go to David Smith. David, how much has South Africa's democracy transformed in the last 20 years?
Oh, it's another country. I mean, the pre-1994 South Africa and the post-94 South Africa are almost from two different planets. I mean, I started here as a journalist in the mid-1980s when P.W. Botha, the extreme right-wing National Party leader, was still in power, and whatever we wrote as journalists had to go past the Bureau for Information, and if they didn't like what we were saying, well, we simply couldn't say it. It's obvious if you can see me on Skype what my color is, and in those days, we lived in a completely divided society, and one of the most horrible things that one noticed when crossing into South Africa, I moved here from Zimbabwe, is that the black majority did not look in the eyes of the white minority because of a certain amount of fear and humiliation and lack of dignity. And that's gone. The most important thing in South Africa post-1994 is that South Africans, whoever they are, have dignity. They're not humiliated, because if they are humiliated, it's certainly against the law. The most important thing is the restoration of dignity to the people of this country, and that's what's made it a different country. There are lots of things that need to be built, and Dr. Kayode's talked about, working on the economy. The education system is in, well, I'll just say it, it's not in a very good shape. I mean, people who are serious about sending their kids to school and serious about education do everything they can to get them into private schools. The public system needs fixing. People who are serious about healthcare, if they have the money to do so, they go to private clinics, private hospitals, rather than the public hospitals. That's got to be fixed. And if the ANC is serious about keeping support when it comes to elections 5 years from now, those are probably the two. In fact, the third issue is jobs, of course. Jobs, education, and healthcare need to be looked at straight away, and not just looked at, but fixed.
Thank you very much. Jobs, education and welfare need to be taken care of. Thank you very much, David Smith, for your perspectives and your contribution to the program. Now back to the studio. South Africa conducted an electronic, free and fair election. We don't see much of this in Africa. What do you think contributed to this feat?
Well, when you say we don't see much of this in Africa and we are trying to look at what contributed, the answer is obvious. South Africa is an African country with a difference. Don't forget, I mean, where they are coming from, don't forget where they are. It's a semblance of Europe, not an African country, the way Nigeria, Togo, Ghana, and probably Somalia are, as the case may be. And so that explains the difference. But beyond that, if you look at that election, you see a bit of attempt to work on autochthonous democracy.
That's a big word.
Yeah.
And I would want you to attempt to break it down.
Oh, I'm sorry.
For the sake of the viewers.
I'm sorry about that. By that I mean a kind of democratic system that reflects the socio-political peculiarities, sentiment, and aspirations of the people. And I've always told people, this is how to build democracy. Democracy is not a bottle of drink, call it whatever name, that we all take the same all over the world. If you take democracy from that monolithic, sacrosanct, immutable point of view, you are likely to fail. That is part of the problem we are having in Nigeria. If you look at the way the voting is, 400 National Assembly members will elect the president. 200 of them will come from the provinces, and then 200 from the center. That presupposes that whoever eventually emerges as the president is truly popular. The person is popular indeed and in truth. Similar to the Electoral College of the United States. While you may not be able to compare them completely, what is interesting is that each of the systems is a reflection of the socio-political structure. It's not built on country A is doing this.
If you would allow me to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Now, if you say that that arrangement has a high propensity to produce a popular candidate, it might not be correct in Zuma's case, because we all know that he's not popular. I mean, David Smith mentioned that fact.
Yeah, but of course, we already addressed that people who voted Zuma voted ANC. A semblance of that happened in this country in this last election of 2011. I mean, analysts have come to say that a lot of people did not vote PDP, they voted President Jonathan. So democracy is such that sometimes it depends on where the pendulum of your interest, swings. Sometimes you vote the party, sometimes you vote the person. It depends on the sentiment of ground. For South Africa today, Zuma is fast losing popularity, but ANC remains a very big party, a symbol of struggle, a symbol of emancipation, and it is difficult for anybody to fault what it is. So, as I was saying, the lesson Nigeria needs to learn from here is that we need to re-engineer and restructure our democratic system, electoral system, to reflect on our socio-political peculiarity. You don't just copy something from US, from Canada, and then you replicate the same thing here, hook, line, and sinker. That's what fella called BBC, big blind country. And it's high time we started learning from the South African people.
Dr. Kayode Iswala, thank you very much for your interesting perspectives to the issue that we talked about today. With the African National Congress and Jacob Zuma getting a second chance, party officials at this point can now appear on television all day, if they like, with smiles on their faces. An overwhelming victory was never in doubt in what has effectively been a one-party state since the ANC under Nelson Mandela won South Africa's first election in 1994. Many say they hope the policies of government will help alleviate poverty and create jobs because, as it stands, the Rainbow Nation is still an economic theory. That's our show for today. You can watch episodes of the show on youtube.com/TVC Africa Today. Till we come your way again, I am Olukayode Alayande, and do remember, this is Africa. Bye now.